From the unexplained to the mundane, come join us on a journey to the fringe. Hello and welcome to Journey to the Fringe. We take you to where stars collide with the horizon and hatch into just baby little conspiracies. We are your podcast guides to this place, Taylor and Chelsea. And speaking of falling stars, I think Chelsea can take over from here.
That was perfect. Today's the day that we talk about George Ralph Noory. And that was the perfect introduction for him, I think. Couldn't get any better. George Ralph is the current host of Coast to Coast AM, he was recruited by Premier Radio Networks to be a guest host on Coast to Coast AM, and he eventually took over for our Lord and Savior Art Bell, becoming the permanent host on January 1st, 2003.
I think we need to take a little step back at this point, Chelsea. Coast to Coast AM is a AM radio show, broadcast basically across North America, but between like midnight and 3 a.m. Eastern time, I believe, correct?
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I can't remember what it is. I've never listened to it.
And I think from like the late 90s.
I'm going to finish that sentence. I've never listened to it live because I'm never up that late.
I actually used to listen to it live
once or twice
because it was on 6:30 Ched in Edmonton from like
I've caught it a few times live, like when we were driving,
but never the whole thing.
But it's not no.
But anyhow, I think from the like mid to late 90s to the like 2010s, somewhere in there, you could say they're the big fish in the conspiracy pond. Or a big fish in the conspiracy pond.
Yeah, I don't want to get too into Coast because this episode isn't about Coast because it's about Noory. But yeah, I mean, Art Bell started Coast to Coast AM. He's like the big kahuna. People love him. He was really great at hosting open lines is what Coast to Coast was known for without any, like any screening. He would thoughtfully debate people. Just a really good host and have a lot of different conspiracy-minded alternative guests on as guests.
I think he would have been a really good skit actor, or what do you call it? Whose line is it anyways?
Oh, that's like improv.
An improv actor, because he was really good at the yes and. Like he didn't shut callers down. He always like kept them going and kind of like getting more out of
he
them.
fully interacted with people and asked thoughtful questions. He was a really good host of Coast to Coast AM and people loved Art Bell, and he never like would turn people down to get on there. He would debate them, and he also was a pretty good showman. He had a lot of classic, and we'll look at it when we do an actual episode on Coast to Coast AM. A lot of really famous things happened and came from Coast to Coast AM. That's Coast to Coast AM. I'm sure in your time on Earth, you have encountered something to do with Coast to Coast AM at one point or another.
And a lot of the assholes that we have done episodes on definitely appeared on Coast to Coast AM.
Yes, sometimes extensively.
Yes.
Which is also probably where we have heard from a lot of them, and I'll get to it. I was a huge listener to Coast AM for a long time, and we will get to that. So that's who George Noory is. That's who Coast to Coast AM is. Like I said, we're focusing on George Noory, who is the current host of Coast to Coast AM, and we're going to leave Coast to Coast AM and Art Bell open for subsequent episodes, which just makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. And in retrospect of doing this episode, I'd like to say that George Noory seems to have such a very controlled presence, more than I have actually seen with anybody else that we've done any episodes on. It's really quite bizarre. Anywhere I went to get the lowdown on George Noory, I came up with literally the exact same script about his life, which is the one that's on Coast to Coast AM. Anywhere I went, it was the copy-paste same thing. So while this episode is not in the direction I hoped for it to go, I still have something quite nice put together for you.
I do know that he does not thoroughly control the Coast to Coast AM subreddit. That's for sure.
Oh no. Oh no, which is where I got a majority of this information. Okay, so who is George Noory? George Ralph Noory. He was born June 4th, 1950, which makes him 73 years old, and he grew up in Detroit, Rock City. His dad is Lebanese Egyptian and mother is Lebanese American. And if you have listened to Coast AM for any amount of time, You're probably familiar with the 3 or 4 stories that Noory tells over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Here's one of them. He became interested in the paranormal and ufology as a child and joined the UFO organization Nightcap as a teenager. Had a spontaneous out-of-body experience once of a child, but was never able to recreate it. That is from memory, my friends. And I haven't listened to Coast in like 10 years. 3 years or so.
Okay.
At least. He has 3 kids, 6 grandchildren. He served 9 years in the U.S. Naval Reserve in no particular order. As far as the rest of his career, it goes like this. He completes his bachelor's degree in communications from the University of Detroit in 1972. It's all very boring. Radio career starts as, do you think anything exciting happens in this guy's life? Like, I don't think it does. His radio career starts as a newscaster with Detroit station WCAR-AM. In 1974, for 4 years, he works as a news producer and executive news producer at WJBK-TV in Detroit. He then went on to be a news director for KMSP TV in Minneapolis, and then another news director at some other letters of Dash TV in St. Louis. Surprisingly to me, probably also maybe to some other people, he won 3 local Emmy Awards for his work in the TV news.
That would have been like St. Louis at the time?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
This is very boring information.
Yeah.
It goes on. Well, in St. Louis, Noory formed Norcom Entertainment, Inc., which developed and marketed video training films to law enforcement and security agencies. I can't find a single thing related to Norcom other than a vague article about a letter of intent to merge with another company in a stock exchange transaction from 2015. So why he created this business that made these types of training videos
I did not know
me.
He had that background.
It's very weird. Very weird. I don't know. And it doesn't sound like he did anything like meaningful when he was in the Naval, I think he was in. Did I say that yet?
Yeah, he was in the Navy.
Yeah, so I don't think that would be it. It also mentions Norcom was developing training programs for daycare centers, nursing homes, and educational facilities to be marketed to over 1,500 school districts.
Oh, okay. Those are 2 things you want to see merged: police training and daycare training. Yeah.
No, like, I don't know what the hell. Like, it's weird, and I don't know what comes of it. So, apparently, probably shuts down, but I don't know. It's just a permanent cliffhanger. You don't see anything else happen. And obviously I didn't get that from the Coast to Coast AM website that's plastered everywhere. And actually, I don't know if this is related or not. This is like weird. But then there's Norcom Restaurants Inc. And he's talked about his restaurant before, right? Which he never really divulged the full details. This Norcom Restaurants Inc., which is, he took the same name as the other one. That
when you're saying Norcom, is it
videos.
Noor? Like his last name?
Norcom.
Oh, okay.
This company opens Cafe Marrakesh and Oasis Bar in Brentwood, Missouri. And let me tell you, it is the most bizarre restaurant concept I've ever heard in my life. So get this. The restaurant's theme revolves around a fictional English soldier, Colonel William Barry, who opened the establishment following an exciting secret mission to Marrakesh. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, have you ever been to a restaurant like this? What kind of food would they serve?
Is this
like I don't know if it's like army rations or like...
Yeah, no, is this like medieval times where you get like tins of rations? Or is it like, what's that one, like the rainforest one where it's all rainforest themed in there, but it's not like a show or anything?
My question exactly. And I would love to read you more information and maybe some Yelp reviews. However, this restaurant is as old, if not older than me. And unfortunately, I'm dating myself by saying I predate Yelp and Google reviews. I don't know. It's about, let's go to the restaurant that's about the Colonel.
Yeah, maybe this is like, it's like the mascot's backstory.
It's so weird. So that's the end of that. It closed down. It didn't...
We can't even confirm if George is involved. Okay.
1996 rolls around and Noory is hosting a late night radio show, not unlike Coast to Coast AM, called The Nighthawk on KTRS in St. Louis, which ultimately is what catches the eye of executives at premier radio networks. which is the syndicators of Coast to Coast AM. Something else I failed miserably to find any sliver of piece of information on. I couldn't find an old recording. I couldn't find anything. And in April 2001, Noory becomes guest host for Coast to Coast, taking over for Ian Punnett as Sunday night host. And I mentioned previously in 2003, he becomes weeknight host of Coast to Coast AM after Art Bell's many retirements. Now, as a side note, since we're on the subject, there was somewhat of a feud between Art Bell and Noory. I don't know if you know this. George Noory first took over show hosting duties in 2003 as a replacement for Bell, but was temporarily discontinued after Bell returned, citing disagreements with Noory. At first, Art seemed pleased with the choice of Noory taking over the show, saying he just gets it. Around the time Art's short-lived Sirius foray, he told George to stop mentioning his name as a part of the closing credits of the show because he didn't want to be associated with it. It also appeared that Noory or Coast to Coast was stealing Art's guest from the other show he was doing. One guest even had their Coast to Coast appearance canceled after an appearance on Midnight in the Desert. Art blatantly called it out and referred to Coast as the other show. While there is a lot of hearsay on that, I just wanted to let you in on. I can tell you one thing for sure, and I can give it to you right out of the big guy's mouth himself, because there is a clip going around of Art Bell talking about George Noory on his ham radio. The audio quality isn't great, but here you go.
It's ham radio level? Okay.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. You shouldn't be in LA. I always tried to keep the Los Angeles influence as far from my life as I could. We had a lot of run-ins with them, and so he was moving right into the center of that influence. But, you know, what he does, that's his biz.
You mean in terms of the network?
Yeah, Sherman Oaks.
Now, why do you think he wanted to do that? Why would he decide to do that? Is that going to mean he's going to do the show from KFI?
It's going to mean he'll do the show from Premier Studios, I'm sure, in Thousand Oaks. But I think it's a mistake. Every other radio program is originated in New York or Washington or LA, and part of the charm for me of that show was always that I wanted my own staff, in other words, and so I demanded and was successful in demanding a complete buffer from those people. And when I left, they took that opportunity to decimate that entire operation up there. It's closed down now. There's about 30 people that lost their jobs because I retired, and so now that I'm gone, they're able to take very sharp control of it, of course, and so what you're seeing here is part of that.
So I can understand a producer and a producer, but why did this signal go through Medford, or did it?
Yeah, sure it did. Instead of delivering my signal by ISDN, the way everybody else does, we found it a much cleaner, better way to deliver the signal, and that was by KU-band satellite. And so the KU-band satellite link was in Medford when Premier bought the program, and so we never changed that. I wouldn't let them change it.
Oh, I see. So that was set up beforehand. I got it. So you were uplinking to Medford, and Medford was that's where your board operator was, and that's where it went back up to the satellite for the stations you were on whatever network you were on before.
Yeah, well, not a lot of people understand. I ran my own board. However, there was an engineering staff up there that would do certain things, but I ran my own board, answered my own telephones, and George didn't do any of that. He's got his guy who replaced me. He's got people who screen his calls, and he's got people who do literally everything for him, run the commercials and everything. See, I did everything. I ran the commercials, I ran my board, I answered the phones, I did all of it.
Okay. All right. That answers answer some questions I had got on that subject inadvertently since you mentioned that, but I had wondered that for some time, how Medford came into play. But that makes sense if it was there before Premier picked it up. But again, what are George's motivations for being in Los Angeles? I mean, I can see. St. Louis is a big city. I mean, it's not like living in the middle of nowhere. I mean, what's his appeal to want to be here?
I could only speculate. He probably, and I really shouldn't, but, he may think that he can be closer to the political side of the company and hobnob with those folks, and I can't really think of any other, in fact, I can't think of any advantage to being in Los Angeles. All I can think of is disadvantages. It would cost probably 2-3 times as much to live in LA as it would cost to live in St. Louis. And until the first survey comes out, if I were George, I would not have sold my home and moved to St. Louis, or moved to LA rather from St. Louis, until I saw how I was doing. That's just my own personal opinion.
I hear you. I understand that. I would agree with that. Hell, if I could make the same money I make here, I would probably be I wouldn't be in a small town like you are in, Art. My preference would be to be in a city, but not this one. I'd probably be in some place of maybe 500,000 people or so, something like that. Not the 13 or 14 million people I'm surrounded by here.
Yeah, exactly. What's the point? I think Rush says it all the time. What difference does it make where I am? It doesn't make any difference at all, as long as the radio program is okay. And I always tried to keep I did. I kept the Los Angeles influence totally away from me, completely away from me. And I always thought that made a difference in the way I was on the air. I just, I was myself. And so, you'd have to ask George why he went to LA. But he's actually moving this weekend. So on Monday, I think it is Monday, Monday or Tuesday, his show will begin to emanate from the studios of Premier in LA.
Well, maybe they're trying to persuade. Maybe the network wanted him out here for some reason. Maybe it's not so much he wants to be here. Maybe they're trying to persuade him or something to be here. Maybe there's some reason they want him here.
Maybe he likes the weather.
The weather is a good thing.
Whatever. They couldn't have moved me. No way in hell.
After Art Bell's death in 2018, Noory said that the two were not that close personally, and there were major differences in their approaches. Despite this, Noory said that Bell was, quote, instrumental in me being where I am now, end quote. Yeah, he is, because he gave you the radio show to go to, giving him his career. George says that if he wasn't on a national radio show, he would be in politics. Probably something of a mix between Biden and Ron Santos, I would imagine. Why he felt we needed to know that, beyond me, and why I felt the need to tell you that, also beyond me.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been his sharpest the last couple of years, but I can't imagine him with his, every now and then he gets an opinion in, and they're just the stupidest things you hear.
And apparently it has declined sharply in the last couple of years. He apparently has let his political views out on Coast to Coast. People aren't happy about. I believe I get to it. This is right from the Coast to Coast AM website. This is where you see everywhere. Noory captivates program listeners with his discussions of paranormal phenomena, time travel, alien abductions, conspiracies, and all things curious and unexplained. He is driven, he has said, by the desire to solve the great mysteries of our time. I mean, I feel like it's a stretch because he's the least captivating guy I've ever listened to that asks zero thoughtful questions. Some questions, some may argue, would bring into question whether or not he's even listening to the individual being interviewed. So George gets the full-time Coast gig, and he slowly just monetizes the shit out of absolutely everything he can get his hands on. He co-writes a bunch of books. Don't worry, reviews included 1 star because they're the best. These are the ones cited on his Wikipedia page. 2006, Noory and George Burns, William. Worker in the Light. Fran rates this 2 stars out of 5. Not interesting enough to get very far into the book. Sorry, I expected more. I'm thinking he is really into himself and in my honest opinion has a holier than thou attitude. 2009, same authors, George Noory. Oh my god, I read that like an idiot. George Noory and William Burns. Journey to the Light. I just realized what I did. 2 out of 5 stars. Too many stories. I was interested in finding out how to journey to the light, although there were many stories from people's accounts. There wasn't any detail how to reach the next hemisphere. 2011. George Noory and Rosemary Guiley, Talking to the Dead. 2 out of 5 stars. This book talked more about the people who developed the equipment to talk to the dead than actual conversations. This book was disappointing. 2013. Oh, this was one of my favorite George Noory books. Also co-authored with William J. Burns. George Noory's Late Night Snacks. George Noory has put together the ultimate after midnight cookbook.
That's why you said that to me.
Yeah. Late night snacks for late night radio. Whether you're hankering for some nostalgic treats like homemade toaster tarts or rib sticking dumplings, love you. What? Or something more exotic like spicy hurried curry pockets or Asian fusion salad. George Noory shows you how to whip up quick delicious snacks with whatever ingredients are lying around your kitchen in the wee hours. I had to give you the description for that one. Now, Mike Mosley reviewed this quite extensively, and I'm going to read this to you because I quite enjoyed it. To start, I will give you my overall feelings for this book. I found it to be a pleasant change from many cookbooks, even though it's called a book of snacks, all capitalized. There are many recipes that make excellent meals in themselves. He capitalizes snacks in every instance it appears in this review. I highly recommend the book for anyone who is bored with their current recipes. It will give you ideas how to spice them up. Included are many tweaks to change your average snack to a tasty meal. Being somewhat of a cookbook collector, I've seen quite a few boring cookbooks. When I read the description of the book, it sounded interesting and I was not disappointed. What I found useful was that even though a number of recipes were pretty ordinary, George Noory added an interesting twist to them by adding ingredients other than what you would normally think. An example, a great example might I add, is his meatloaf recipe, which includes pepperoni. The simple addition adds quite a nice change to a plain meal. Another snack I found to be quick and easy was his chicken fried rice. Admittedly, it's more work than opening a pre-made package and heating, but as he says, this recipe allows you to adjust the flavor to your own taste. I mean, was he expecting this to be like just open the package and throw it in the microwave?
It's Uncle Ben's. Just put Uncle Ben's in the microwave.
The book advertises over, remember this is capitalized, 150 snacks. It actually includes numerous recipes that are great for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and dessert. A large variety of snacks is very impressive, including recipes for candy, ice cream, butter, meat, bread, cereal, nuts, sauces, soups, seasonings, dressings, eggs, sandwiches, salads, and many more. That's his review. Mike, thank you for your duty. That was exactly what I needed to know about that book.
And I was going to say there's no way he came up with these recipes, and then he said the pepperoni and the meatloaf, and I was like, yeah, you know what? These are George Noory's.
Yeah, that sounds like a George Noory.
Do you remember that?
Pepperoni and the meatloaf.
That just reminded me, there was like a month or a few weeks where he was off because he microwaved a Hot Pocket and it was too warm inside.
He microwaved it too long. We've all been there. We're hungry and we can't wait for whatever came out of the microwave.
He was out for at least a week.
Of all the things he doesn't comment on, that was probably the one thing he shouldn't have commented on.
Yeah.
and just made something up. Okay, next one. George Noory. This one, all on his own, Night Talk novel. You know how I love good reviews. And I'm about to give you one of the best reviews you will ever hear in your life from Winston O'Boogie. Thank you for doing the Lord's work with this splendid review. 1 out of 5 stars. And I can't figure out what he actually titled it because it starred out. It's S***E Talk. I don't know what that stands for. Maybe shite
I think
talk.
it's shite talk, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's night talk, but shite talk.
Brace yourself. This is good. I've been familiar with George Noory for many years. As the host of Coast to Coast AM, I have come to regard him as the single most incompetent. Sorry, let me regain my composure. As the single most incompetent broadcaster in the history of radio. Unable to speak coherently. I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. Unable to speak coherently, pronounce words correctly, or understand the idioms of the English language. He is also the laziest and dullest interviewer. I lived most of my life in the UK, and trust me, he couldn't get a job making the tea at the BBC. He makes Alan Partridge sound like Alistair Cook. All of this you might think would be something of a drawback when you host an interview and talk-based show. And yet he keeps announcing that Premier Radio have awarded him yet another long-term contract. Either he is an incredibly cheap yet lucrative way of filling the night hours, or he knows where the bodies are buried. Given all of this, how could I not be intrigued by the prospect of Mr. Noory venturing into the literary world? Curiosity got the better of me, and I duly purchased the copy of Night Talk. A ghostwriter does not appear to have been involved. No one is credited or acknowledged as such. Indeed, his scant 4 lines of acknowledgements, mostly his family, does not even mention an editor. The lack of such is immediately apparent. A ghostwriter or an editor might be expected to have a basic understanding of the structure of a novel, and it's very clear that no such person got near this thing. Moreover, the manuscript, far from being professionally proofread, has clearly not been so much as glanced at by anyone with a passing acquaintance with the English language. No, it was immediately apparent that this turd could only be the product of one man. I was reminded of nothing more than Truman Capote's famously sneering dismissal of Jack Kerouac, quote, "That's not writing, it's just typing," end quote. Those familiar with Mr. Noory as a broadcaster will know what I mean when I say that only he could describe an object being a round cylinder, or talk about a character who waits while he booted up his computer tablet. Or referred to that well-known cinematic genre, car chase films. Chapters are annoyingly, pointlessly short. Chapter breaks appear in the middle of a conversation, with the next chapter being a continuation of the same conversation in the same location. Much of this feels dictated and then transcribed verbatim and sent to press with no revisions or passes. How else does the sentence, quote, "We can imply from what we've seen that Noel didn't know the woman," escape without someone pointing at that imply is correct or should infer or deduce, or the use of horribly clumsy words like getting the whole news media to hold it didn't sound doable. Again, the EMTs, cops, and coroner people who showed up at the scene. Have you ever seen anyone purse their brow? One of Mr. Noory's characters does it. Does anyone know what a police attitude test is? An aptitude test I'm familiar with. At one point, the hero and heroine are trapped in a burning building, and our author displays the astonishment breadth and invention of his vocabulary. In the space of a single page, we get, quote, "The room was filled with smoke, which made them go into coughing spasms," end quote. Quote, "He took a deep breath and choked on smoke, going into coughing spasms," end quote. Quote, "Choking on the smoke," end quote. Quote, "The space was dark and thick with smoke, sending them both gasping for air into coughing spasms," Quote, coughing as smoke from the fire burn their lungs, end quote. Smoke makes you cough in spasms, get it? Absurdly long sentences with no punctuation leave you feeling slightly dizzy or just keep going on and on for no apparent reason. This is at its worst when Noory wants to impress you with his detailed knowledge, as in this example. Quote, so was the clutter that surrounded the house and barn like a lake of cast-offs from the sea. The anchors and portholes, Greg mentioned. Rusty old cannons removed from Davy Jones' locker. The helm to steer an ocean liner or a day fisher. Propellers to drive a ship, in brackets. Helpful that in case you don't know what a ship's propeller does. Rebracket. Winches to raise the sails on a 10-meter sloop. Lifeboats and dinghies, oars, lines, masts, booms, buoys, engines. In brackets. Did you know Mr. Noory was in the Navy? He knows these things. Hold on. We're not done yet. End bracket. Figureheads from the bows of sailing ships, bowspirits, galley stoves on gimbals to rock with the sea, and a host of other salty artifacts, nautical treasures or junk depending on your perspective. End quote from the book. Rule of 3, George. Rule of 3. He says, oh, I could go on. Let me give Mr. Noory a brief moment of credit. There is a germ and a half-decent idea in here. And if he was able to recognize his own limitations and seek the assistance or guidance from someone who knew what they were doing, he might have produced a passable novel to pass a long plane ride. But he has no clue what he's doing, so this isn't that. His characters are entirely one-dimensional. The plot, such as it is laid out in the first 20 pages or so, and barely developed over the remaining 300. Action keeps stopping so his protagonist can have long conversations about all the author's favorite kin arts. Towards the end, there's a bizarre, irrelevant, and geographically mystifying drive-in fog up the mountain somewhere, which is only there so Mr. Noory can throw in an alien encounter for his hero. And then it just ends. No real conclusion or resolution. Indeed, as George Noory's alter ego Greg Noel equals GN, Greg Noel. Clever, huh? Walks into the light in the final sentence. I was filled with a profound sense of dread as the possibility of a sequel to the night talk crept into my brain. In summary, a waste of paper. I can only add the usual caution that I only awarded this a single star because no stars, or more appropriately negative stars, are not an option. That has to be the most detailed, hilarious review I've ever read in my life. And I loved it. Okay, so those are all the books that were mentioned on his Wikipedia. I'm not sure how these other escaped if you just search them. Honestly, I don't know if Noory, along with these others, are just looking to slap his name on there or what's going on. 2014, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, a fresh guide to an ancient mystery. This is written with Richard M. Dolan and George Noory. 1 out of 5 stars. Never received it. I had to include that. Another 1 out of 5 stars. I was expecting facts and logic. Not enough facts and not enough logic for this 21st century mind. Oh, and I must mention there are practically 0 conclusions. 2015, someone is hiding something. What happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370? Richard Belzer, George Noory, and David Wayne. 1 out of 5 stars. Childishly serious, self-aggrandizing, throughout nonsensical logic, internally contradictory, and full of gratuitous, biased, irrational, irrelevant political tripe. 2017, Mad as Hell, America's #1 all-night radio host takes on the dangerous world we live in. This is just George Noory. So I don't feel like it would be good. 2 out of 5 stars. This is misleading. Save your money. This is a catch-all book and the title is very misleading. It contained the entire history about UFOs. He spoke about his anger about how things were today, but the last part of the book, and it seemed like at least half of it, was a self-biography. He should have kept it short, but seemed to repeat himself several times and rambled on and on. The book was just too long and I found myself skipping many pages just trying to get through it. George has many talents, but writing isn't one of them. 2022, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, the definitive guide to the UFO mystery, new and expanded edition, Richard Dolan, George Noory. This one actually didn't have anyone who wrote out reviews. It didn't have a very good star rating though. 2022, Past Lives in Ancient Lands and Other Worlds, Understand Your Soul's Journey Through Time, Shelley A. Kayer, PhD, and George Noory. 2 out of 5 stars. The information about the agents is minimal and vague. The exercises are the same thing repeated with a couple sentences added in. On the whole, it was not insightful, and it was a little biased towards New Age thinking. It definitely was not worth the $15 I spent. You can get more on YouTube meditation for free. I do not recommend this book. Good day.
Good day.
2023, The Body Code, Unlocking Your Body's Ability to Heal Itself, Dr. Bradley Nelson and George Noory. This one is somehow his most highly rated book with his name on it on Amazon, which I find interesting because there were a lot of angry reviews. Well, let me just read this one. 1 out of 5 stars. Disappointed. This book is in no way complete. It is fragmented and you must purchase the app, which is about $30 per month.
What?
He should have the complete info and diagrams at his website free of charge. As he says, the publisher limited the size of the book and only charged for the app if someone wants something more convenient. The book does not deliver the information. I don't understand why someone would be motivated to write such a book that is so incomplete. It's like selling a car that doesn't have an engine or transmission and promising that it will take you from point A to point B. So those are the books. We're seeing a lot of things with the book. We're seeing that he's not a great writer. He writes a lot of forewords to books just so they can get his name on there. We're also seeing him just blatantly throw like shit to the wind and hope that he makes money off of something.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, with the forewords, my theory is that somebody just pays him and sends him what they wanted to say and he'll just sign it.
Based at what we get through in this, I really think that that's what's happening as well. And then we're seeing on the last one just a blatant money grab after somebody's bought a book. So what else has he monetized? December 2012, Gaiam TV, which is now referred to as Gaia, launched Beyond Belief with George Noory, a new TV show exploring the unknown and mysteries of the universe. The 1-hour weekly series features Noory's informative, investigative, and dynamic conversations. I would honestly, listening to him, not describe any of that as him.
Yes.
Yep, as well as some of his favorite guests from the radio program. Obviously, since he's in it for the money, it's not being done at gunpoint.
No,
So,
but
yeah.
this would, I never actually saw an episode of it. I was aware of it.
Yeah.
But this would at least show us how invested he is in his actual interviews. And like,
It's true.
my guess is it's
He's
him on
paying
his phone the entire time. And then just popping up to ask a quick question when he hears silence.
To be sure. Membership starts there at $15 per month. This TV show is still going. He has also hosted, quote, Unexplained with George Noory. Not sure why I put a quote on that.
That
but-
sounds right up his alley, actually. A lot of the things he does, I can't explain.
No. He also has appeared on History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Sci-Fi, Larry King Show, and numerous others. I don't know. I guess they didn't want to list the numerous others on the website, but he is in Extraordinary: The Revelations, the follow-up to Extraordinary: The Stanley Tiger Story. Which we also need to do one on that as well. It's on the list. Maybe one day we'll get to it. I'm going to make a note right here. Extra. I don't know if you say it extraordinary or extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
But that's
I mean, tomato, I guess at that point. Okay. So he started paranormaldate.com.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, you're going to love this part. This is the blurb on the front page. George Noory, syndicated radio host of Coast to Coast AM and Sirius XM satellite radio.
He started a dating app because he noticed how lonely everybody who's calling to talk to him is.
Basically, this takes an interesting turn. Okay, he's syndicated radio host of Coast to Coast AM and Sirius XM satellite radio, entertaining millions weekly on nearly 700 radio stations. Created Paranormal Date after seeing a need from his massive loyal audience. They were so lonely. Noory says, I keep hearing the same thing at speaking events around the country. George, I need a place to meet people of like mind that understand me and my interests. And from that, paranormaldate.com was born. That's what he says. They say it's free, and yes, it is to sign up, but you cannot communicate for free. And in poking around the website, I saw it was powered by whitelabeldating.com, which I then went to the website to see what it was about. Basically, it runs the website paranormaldate.com, and it shares from a database. So when it says there are however many members on paranormaldate.com, it's platform sharing. So it's not counting those on paranormaldate.com when it says communicate with however many members that are active on there. It also means that members who join and pay for paranormaldate.com to communicate with people are less than likely to be communicating with someone from paranormaldate.com. In the terms of service, you do have to agree to have your information added to the network. So you have this collection of like dating websites of all sorts of themes. Whoever's powered by this, and you're getting messages that you have to pay to see and ask them about, you're like, hey, you like aliens? Do you like ghosts? Which is why everyone's gonna be on this dating website. And a majority of the time the responses is like, what the fuck are you talking about? That is weird stuff, man.
I just assume it's a white supremacist dating site outside of that as well.
I did as well. I don't know if it is or not. I don't know why it's called
Cannot
that.
confirm nor deny.
No, I cannot. I tried to see if I could get pricing, but it's hidden without signing up. I saw someone post 3 years ago. It was $30 a month or $199 for a year.
Jesus.
So it's probably increased by now. And turns out people are highly unsatisfied with it. There are only 1 and 2 star reviews anywhere I was able to look. And now I have some reviews. Laura M says, worst dating site ever. Fake profiles and scammers, beware. Same experiences as others that I would receive a notification, then go to the site and their profile was no longer active many times. No one on the site mentions anything about paranormal interest. Only communicated with one person who was real. Last one wanted to Google chat because his phone line had funky static and I couldn't hear him. First red flag. He later gave me a sad story that his power was cut off and asked to borrow money. Bye-bye. I'm canceling. George Noory should be ashamed of this site. Tip for consumers, beware. Don't use the site. Jim, predatory, bogus, don't pay, you will not get a refund. I joined on Saturday, requested a refund $1.99 on Sunday per message, but did not request cancellation. Customer service responded Tuesday 4 a.m. by email. Since I had used the site, viewed messages probably sent by employees, and replied to messages, I was not eligible for a refund of 1 year membership. So I swear this is my experience. I am still a member, in quotes, victim. So I get to talk to probably ghost non-existent members, whores, predators, catfish, and chumps like me. You will do better looking for companionship at a grocery store, and there's no evidence anybody wants to talk about paranormal or date stuff either. A bogus dating site, in my opinion. George Noory, a millionaire, you should be ashamed. I would give the site a negative rating if possible. And I just threw this one in because here's another mention. Lucy, mostly hookers and scammers. Not sure why that keeps coming up. I go on the website thinking I could date an outer space alien. I believe that this is someone signing up for paranormaldate.com. Instead, it's all of these 90-year-old wheelchair-bound ladies in Brooklyn, Perth, Amboy, Trenton, and hookers. I put a little profile on there and in 2 days had been solicited 200 times. It's hard to keep up with because of their profiles deleted in 2 hours. They are gorgeous in the profile photos, not real no doubt. I picked up the patterns and banter in a few minutes. They want you to contact them through coded Gmail and they disguise their phone numbers by saying things like, I was on Highway 888 and passed 780 donkeys and then saw 1001 crows. I am trying to communicate with 2 of them, but haven't gotten beyond a cursory introduction. One lady just told me that her mother is sick in LA and she needs help getting out there. Hard pass. Tip for consumers. Most of the profile that interested me were taken down in a matter of minutes, and they were all so pretty too. Hard pass. Now that is someone who would be listening to Coast.
Poor guy never got his alien date.
No, he didn't get his date with an alien. Overview. Paranormal Date has a rating of 1.02 stars from 42 reviews, indicating that most customers are generally dissatisfied with their purchase. Paranormal Date ranks 692nd among dating websites.
There are that many dating websites?
I assume there's a ton. I mean, how else would white label dating be a thing? I mean, we could probably start Journey to the Fringe.
The next question is 602nd out of how many?
693. Okay, so he also does live appearances, which he shamelessly gloats on Coast to Coast AM about, especially his singing during the event, which is weird to say the least because, I mean, I doubt not one single person bought a ticket to hear him sing. Cut to George Noory singing right here.
Love me with all of your heart. That's all I want, love. Love me with all of your heart, or not at all. Just promise me this, that you'll give me all your kisses. Every winter, every summer, every fall.
The Coast to Coast AM website is riddled with ads, which they obviously make a profit of. And there are multiple complaints and criticisms of Noory that Coast to Coast has become one big infomercial Noory and Coast is profiting off of. I can't confirm for sure, but lots of speculation that guests pay for their spots, pointing that books and websites are linked and talked about, but during open lines, guests are quickly cut off mentioning any such thing. Other than that, Doc Wallach is on so frequently promoting his health products and his tangy tangerine. I think that's one of the main guests now that they have quite frequently.
I forgot about that guy who's like, you can't eat these things. Don't worry, I have vitamin packs for anything that could possibly be wrong with you.
Yeah.
You can't use any oil in your cooking. You have to be vegetarian, not vegetarian, but...
Yeah, I can't remember what it is now, but he is on very frequently now. They have had guests who were regulars on there leave as well. So yeah, I'll have another commentary on that shortly. So after all of that, I was curious as to George Noory's worth. What do you think?
I would put him somewhere around like 8 million probably.
His reported net worth as of late 2016. So it's going to vary from this.
It's probably higher now.
In 2016 was 2 million.
Okay.
With a salary of 500,000.
Wait, the fuck did he do with all his money? He's been doing it for more than 4 years at that time.
That's the version of like what he's been involved in and everything. And I can't do sightings of George Noory, which is always my favorite part. But what I can do is what do people think of good old Noory, which I was able to find through what Taylor said, the Reddit subreddit.
People go to the people's place.
Yes.
The Reddit.
And Coast to Coast AM Reddit is wild because I haven't seen a positive post or comment about George Noory on there at all. I saw one post that said, I feel so bad for George because what if he reads this and it keeps me up at night, then it makes him sad.
He has no idea what Reddit is. Do not worry.
No. So the list of criticisms is long, especially when compared to Art Bell. From the canned comments Noory heavily relies on, the strange and out-of-touch responses to his guests as if he's not listening, the heavily screened open lines with the same callers time and time again, and the shameless self-promotion and money grabs, it goes on. Personally, I was a long-time insider. I paid for it, which is why I didn't really listen to it at the early hours because I just paid to listen to it whenever I conveniently wanted to. And eventually I canceled it because I just couldn't continue with Noory anymore. I had enough. It continued to get worse and worse, and I was out of there. In the 2010 article about Noory published in The Atlantic, Timothy Lavin wrote, quote, Noory can be an uneven broadcaster. Sometimes he seems to not pay attention fully to his guests, offers strangely obvious commentary, or, and this has alienated some fans, lets clearly delusional or pseudoscientific assertions slide by without challenge. But he listens with heroic patience to all of his callers, end quote.
He'll let a lot of things go with zero pushback, which doesn't mean you aren't biased or you are biased if you don't give any pushback. It's literally, that's your job as a journalist or an interviewer.
Yes.
Is test what they're actually saying to see if it's actually true.
Not only that, but like most people started listening for Art Bell and they're loyal to Coast, not necessarily George Noory. I would go out on a limb to say they keep talking about how loyal all George Noory's listeners are. I really think that it's Coast. At that point,
the reason he's done so well in my mind is because I believe Coast to Coast finds a lot of its viewership from old lonely people who have had a spouse die, who are awake during the night, and he is a soothing voice for them and will listen. His conversations that go best are conversations with old people, call it. Like, he has them down hard.
He does. And they're probably buying up everything that he slings.
Yeah. And like that one guy said in the review on Paranormal Date, how it's 95-year-old women.
Now, this little fact could be chalked up to millions of different causes, but going from Bell to Noory, I was able to find these stats. Coast to Coast AM declined by 7.5 million listeners.
Do you have a time period over, or is it just kind of in general?
No, it was in general.
Okay.
But they're quickly to say that he's on one of the biggest syndicated radio shows in the universe.
I would say that one of the possible, I fully want to put this all on George, but over the course of his time with Coast to Coast, I believe a lot of its listeners have moved to podcasts or things that are not time related or are just kind of free. Because like pretty much all their guests who come on have their own podcasts.
Yep. Absolutely.
And there's a lot more available than there was during the time of Coast to Coast.
No, that absolutely could be. And like I said, it could be a million different causes.
Not to be a George Noory and give your opinions no pushback.
There could be a million different causes for that. That being exactly some of what you just said. So what else do we got? We got Micker Trusted In on Reddit. And he says, George has a passing interest in the paranormal, or at least he did, but he was never as intriguing as a host as Art, never. But the dude is a businessman. If you've listened long enough, you hear him talking about his failed business ventures, the restaurants, the racehorses. Coast is just a business venture to him. The live shows, the supplements, that's why it's so formulaic. There is no passion anymore. What little there was to begin with wasn't that great anyway. But it's just a vehicle for George and his partners to make money for. For what? I don't know. I know some of his grandkids have fallen off the rails. Maybe he's trying to create a financial cushion for them. KP Murphy _ has said no inside knowledge, but it seems like once Art officially and finally stepped away from Coast, the show began to change in terms of the average nightly topic, and it really shifted. Pandemic, 2020 election. This is before I stopped listening, and I keep seeing that this was a shift, and it's gone.
This is after.
Down. This is
after you stopped listening.
This is after, sorry. It is just tanked since then. I actually, since I stopped listening, I haven't really listened at all. I've always felt, this goes on for KP Murphy _ I've always felt George didn't care about the paranormal subjects nearly as much as Art did. I know he never had the GIS people on the EVPs because he said he didn't believe in them or something along those lines. It just seems like plenty of other people would have done a better job of keeping the spirit of the show alive. I agree. Thankfully, in the podcast era, there are different avenues to scratch the paranormal itch, but nothing will ever match the magic of listening to Art Bell broadcasting in the middle of the night. Cautious Thoughts 362. Yeah, I miss Art too. I've listened faithfully after he left, but it's not the same. I agree, it really seemed to change during and after the pandemic. I've always thought it was apolitical, but it got very political. It became evident which political side George was on and who he supported. It was a huge disappointment for me, and my feelings for the show have gone steeply downhill ever since.
Yeah.
I still listen, but it's only a matter of time until I start a serious search to find something else to listen to in the middle of the night. I can take or leave the show these days.
And it's just become blatant. He has always had those views.
Yeah.
Whether by omission or what he didn't push back on, he has always had those views. He just didn't vote.
Yeah,
and therefore apolitical and unbiased.
For some weird reason. I guess that made up for something in his mind. George and open lines. This is a question put on Reddit. So I used to listen to Coast a lot back in 2014, and I recently just started listening again, and I noticed something off. Am I the only one who gets the idea George isn't that interested in talking to open line callers that much anymore? Could just be me, but it just seems like he isn't at all there, and he seems to even avoid Friday nights a lot. I've heard a lot in the Reddit subgroup as well. He only does a couple hours a lot of the time and then puts on a rerun for the last couple hours. Nashamura says he never seemed very interested in doing the show, period. He's been half-assing it ever since he got the gig. He's not even paying attention most of the time. It sounds like he's reading a script. Angie_vague says, as an on-topic aside, I'd like to note that Art Bell was intelligent and engaged in the conversation. Noory is neither. I tried to listen to Noory on several occasions, but his general dumbassery is so off-putting. User deleted says Noory basically took Coast to Coast in a direction Art always resisted. He turned it into a late night infomercial with guests like Doc Wallach and Ben Fuchs. No doubt Noory reads from cue cards on some shows. I would say all of them. Constantly interrupts guests with inane questions. He also got rid of the sacred cow of Coast to Coast. Unscreened calls. Okay, I just had to keep reading. Unscreened calls, and especially unscreened open lines. Also, you cannot do the famous Ghost to Ghost AM and New Year's prediction shows without unscreened calls like Art used to do. Art prided himself on his open line segments. It was like his guitar solo on the show. Noory actually makes callers submit Ghost to Ghost stories before Halloween to tell on the show. I can go on and on about how much Noory throttled Coast's legacy, the many appearances of Dr. Morgus, the same 4 callers every night because most of the Coast loyalists have fled. Noory also takes Fridays off a lot so he won't have to do open lines. He obviously avoids it like the plague. His guest hosts are terrible. The only ones I find tolerable if I do decide to listen are Richard Serrett and George Knapp. Just a few of my frustrations I have accumulated over the years. I do not hate George Noory, I just think he was a bad choice. The popularity of other shows like John B. Wells' Arc Midnight, Clyde Lewis Ground Zero, Jimmy Church Fade to Black proves Coast sucks now. Jimmy and John B were actual good hosts at one point and were dismissed for some reason. Oh, I forgot too, Linda Moulton Howe jumped ship, also got her own show. Okay, that's for now.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, there's a whole thing behind that.
Linda Moulton Howe?
Yeah.
Not going on Coast?
Yeah, no, she did like a whole hour episode of YouTube video about how she had a very large disagreement with George and she won't be on there anymore.
Oh, really? I didn't listen to that one.
Yeah.
You have anything else to say about it?
I can't remember.
Okay. I like John B. Wells. He was kicked off really quickly, actually. I don't think he was a co-host for very long. What I enjoyed about him is he actually challenged guests and asked decent questions. What else did he say?
People aren't willing to pay if they're going to be questioned.
Rathmont. My favorite example is when he asked a guest about Sanskrit. Quote, is it called Sanskrit because it's script made in the sand? And the guest was like, He always did stupid things like that. That was the end of that comment. Anonymous put, George Noory took over after Art left. Yes, he did. He turned a great show into a 4-hour infomercial hawking scams like Carnivora, home witchcraft kits, and $95 DVDs about technical remote viewing by conman Major Ed Dames. Noory is famous for being unprepared for the interviews and for falling asleep while the guest is talking. He also fails to ask any critical or perceptive questions. Instead, he responds with comments from his list of stock answers his fans have christened Nooryisms. He further damaged the reputation of the show by hosting videos made by full-time conman, part-time pervert, cat hoarder, and e-bagger George Senda. I refer you to Senda Leaks and other websites devoted to exposing him. Google it. Keywords Falky, George Senda, and the guy from Pittsburgh. Actually, he's not. Gotta look into that guy. We're ending with George Noory is a disgrace. I don't think most of his open callers are legit. They are paid actors who are given canned questions to ask George. Even if a few are actually real, they are heavily screened. Art took calls himself live on the air. George doesn't have the balls to do that. He's a disgrace to the show. That's my episode. That's where my research took me. It was surprising places. Yeah, any closing thoughts? Any general taste that it's left in your mouth.
It just brought back some nostalgia of some like just clearly weird things that happened while listening to it years and years ago.
Oh yeah, you would always be like, did he actually just say that? Like, that doesn't even make sense. But he just said, always, all the time.
Yeah, every episode without fail.
I don't really know that he has, other than being this radio host in which he's being paid for. I wouldn't say that he necessarily has any interest in the paranormal. To be honest with you, he's never said anything that's quite compelling that he's so driven to find answers. I don't know if you're of the same thought process on that.
I would say that's an apt point. There's a couple things I find very annoying about George. I do agree. He says that he leaves out personal bias. I have seen interviews that he does where it's either the omission or the pointed questions clearly show he does not agree with the topic. And like one that comes to mind very clearly was a guy who was on there about vegetarian diets and how they're good for the planet, good for the body. And he just kept trying to shit on the guy the entire interview. And then when they went to open lines, he picked just people who do not agree with a vegetarian diet. Nobody with questions, just saying like, this is shit.
He very slyly doesn't offer an opinion, but you're right on things like that. Is what I didn't mention. It's very like you wouldn't really notice it because you're so used to George saying he doesn't give opinions on things.
Yeah. Well, and then he does say like he tries to keep an unbiased appearance. Like one of the things he's always said he doesn't vote, but that doesn't mean you don't have opinions.
Exactly. And why you wouldn't vote because you're on Coast to Coast AM doesn't make sense. Like that's absurd.
And he very clearly has one party that he likes over the other one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's. I don't think I have anything to add.
Great. Yeah. So that's George Ralph Noory, and we did it.
One day we'll do a Coast to Coast episode, but for now, I have been Taylor here with Chelsea. We are Journey to the Fringe. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Journey to the Fringe. If you have liked what you have listened to, please like, share, subscribe, or follow, depending on what venue you are listening to us through. Also, please, if possible, leave a 5-star review, as that really helps us in the algorithms. Should you wish to interact with us, please check us out on your social media of choice. I bet you we are there. And if you really want to communicate with us and give us ideas for new episodes or tell us that we're wrong and terrible, either way, please send us an email at journeytothefringe@gmail.com. For now, I'll see you in the next episode.